Well, good morning, everyone. Happy Friday morning to you, and welcome back to Now TV. My name is Don K. Preston. I am the president of Preterist Research Institute of Ardmore, Oklahoma. And this is what I call my morning musings here on Now TV. I've been with you for a good little while now here on this program. Our channel is growing. The number of views is growing, even just on YouTube, and we're extremely thankful for that. Now, we've been involved for a good little while in a study of what I call the challenge of Christ. And what I'm going to share with you this morning goes to the very heart of the challenge of Christ. For those of you who may be new to my program, the challenge of Christ is found in John chapter 10 and verse 37, in which Jesus said, "Do not believe me, pardon me, for my words' sake. Believe me for my works." Now, in Oklahoma, in Arkansas, where I was raised up as a kid, we would express it like put up or shut up, as I pointed out last week. In other words, it's not enough to say you're going to do something. It's not enough to say you are someone. If you cannot demonstrate that, then where's the proof? I mean, after all, if Jesus said he was the Son of God, then he ought to be able to perform the actions of God. That's just logical. Not only that, Jesus made many, many different predictions and prophecies. Most of them revolved around two major subjects. One of them was the Son of Man is going to go up to Jerusalem, be betrayed, crucified, buried, raised the third day. Now, I don't know about you. I've tried to put myself in the shoes of these apostles when they heard that for the very first time. How staggering, how shocking, how downright weird that probably seemed to them. And thus they did not understand. We're told several times that when Jesus predicted his own death, burial, and resurrection, they did not understand what he was talking about. What is this you're saying? I mean, let's face it. None of us have witnessed anyone being raised from the dead. Certainly, we have never seen anyone raise themselves from the dead. But you see in John chapter 10, verse 18, Jesus, speaking of his impending death, said, "I have the power to lay it, my life, down. I have the power," and the Greek word there is exousia, meaning authority, not just simply power. There's a difference between power and authority. But I have the power to lay it down. I have the power to take it up again. No man takes it from me. You know, this is an incredible, incredible statement. Many people say, well, the Jews killed Jesus. Well, in one sense, that's true. But in the ultimate sense, it is Jesus that gave himself over to the Jews. When the temple guard came out to arrest him, he didn't resist. So anyway, the whole point of it is, one of Jesus's fundamental prophecies was, I'm going to raise myself from the dead. Okay, did he do it or not? This is the challenge of Christ, ladies and gentlemen. Those of us who are Christians say he kept his word. Atheists, agnostics, and skeptics, they want to find fault with that claim and say, no, the apostles came and stole the body, or the women took the body away, or they went to the wrong tomb. They didn't know where he was really buried. I mean, on and on and on. Gary Habermas, a modern day scholar, is one of the world's greatest experts on the resurrection of Christ. And Gary Habermas makes the comment, there is no other event in all of ancient history that is as well attested, as easily proven, more powerfully proven than the resurrection of Jesus Christ. What an astounding statement. But again, the whole point of it is, Jesus said, if I do not do what I say I'm going to do, then don't believe me. The second major prophecy that Jesus gave that goes to the challenge of Christ was, the Son of Man will come in the glory of the Father with his angels and shall reward every man according to his, I've got a weather alert, amber alert or something like that. Don't know what that is. Sorry, I hope that doesn't come through on the microphone. Anyway, back to Matthew 16, 27 and 28. The Son of Man will come in the glory of the Father with his angels and shall reward every man according to his works. And verily I say unto you, there are some standing here, which that's 2,000 years ago, ladies and gentlemen, which shall not taste of death until they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom. Now, folks, that can't be ignored. And lamentably, far too many Christians are not aware of the challenge of Christ. But it's real. Those are Jesus' own words. And I want to suggest to you that is way past time for the modern church to come to grips with how powerful the challenge of Christ is and stop making excuses. You know, John MacArthur, very popular, very influential modern dispensational prophecy teacher, says, well, it's certainly true that the early church believed that Jesus was going to come in the first century, in their generation. Now, we know he didn't do it. So the skeptics have a heyday, John MacArthur says, in pointing out how Jesus taught and the apostles believed he was supposed to come back in the first century. But the reason he didn't, John MacArthur argues, is that every generation since the first generation, God simply wants every single generation to stand on the, quote, tiptoe of expectation that this will be the generation to see Jesus coming. Ladies and gentlemen, that's not what the text says, and anyone who can read knows that's not what the text says. And I can tell you right now, the skeptics, the atheists, the Muslims, and the Jews laugh and scoff at that idea. You know, the Proverbs writer says, Proverbs chapter 12, verse 17, hope deferred makes the heart sick. We've been waiting for 2,000 years. John MacArthur says, no, it's not a problem. It's not a problem that he's delayed. Well, yeah, it's a massive problem because the Bible says, and now in a very little while, the one who is coming will come and will not delay. Yet it's been a 2,000-year delay. And once again, the atheists and skeptics and all those who deny Jesus and who deny the Bible, they say that Jesus failed his own challenge. So what I've been doing is I've been sharing with you how 2 Peter chapter 3 is one of the most commonly appealed to texts to prove that Jesus failed. Because after all, 2 Peter chapter 3 said in the last days, scoffers are going to come, saying, where's the promise of his coming, i.e. his parousia? For since the beginning of creation, all things continue as they were. But Peter begins to affirm the coming of the Lord. The day of the Lord will come as a thief in the night, in which the earth and the elements that are therein shall be burned up. And once again, the skeptics go, see, the earth and the elements are still here. Just look around, dude. It's more than obvious. They do not understand. I've been involved in an exchange with some atheists on YouTube. And this one guy says, well, it's more than obvious that Jesus said he was going to come on the clouds in the first century generation. I responded by saying, you do not understand Hebraic apocalyptic language. And he came back and he said, what is that? See, this is the problem. If you and I do not understand what Hebraic apocalyptic language is, we have no hope of understanding Jesus's predictions of his coming on the clouds with the angels, etc., etc. No hope whatsoever. Now, not only does Peter talk about that day of the Lord, but he said it would be in the last days. And so the atheists say, all you Christians say we're in the last days. By the way, I don't. And for the rest of this month, and for those of you who watch my YouTube videos, you know I have a great special going on. There's not many days left in this month, by the way. For all of you, okay, for all of you Now TV viewers, take advantage of this. Now, this is for U.S. orders only. But my book, The Elements Shall Melt with Fervent Heat. You know, it's really difficult to do that. The Elements Shall Melt with Fervent Heat. This is, to my knowledge, the very first, the only full-length commentary on 2 Peter 3 from the preterist perspective. My other book, The Last Days Identified. Well, you know, Peter said the day of the Lord would come in the last days. What are the last days? Here's a hint. We are not in the last days, ladies and gentlemen. Would you catch that? Do you catch the power of that? We are not in the last days. The last days references, the last days referent in the Bible is to the last days of Old Covenant age of Israel. Not the last days of time, not the last days of the Christian age. So, if you ordered both of these books separately, you would pay $40, okay? That's with shipping. But for the rest of this month, July 2024, U.S. orders only. Total delivered price, $25. You're going to save $15, ladies and gentlemen. So go to my website, donkpreston.com, BibleProphecy.com. Click the tab right up at the very top, order the two books, save yourself $15. Actually, it's closer to 20 when you actually do the math, because I'm giving discount on the books and I'm not charging any shipping whatsoever. Okay? So save yourself $20 and get two absolutely wonderful books that may very well change your life. So, Peter said the day of the Lord will be in the last days. So, I've been going to Isaiah chapters 2 through 4. Isaiah 2 through 4 is one of the most important of all Old Covenant last days prophecies. Now, I want you to hear what I'm about to say. The fundamental last days prophecy is Deuteronomy 32, which is prefaced by Deuteronomy 31, 29 to 31, okay? In which Moses said, I know that after my departure, you will become utterly corrupt in the last days, that we're going to fill up the measure of their sin. So Deuteronomy 32 actually lies beneath and behind Isaiah chapters 2 through 4. I'll get to Deuteronomy 32 in another series, And for those of you who want to watch and participate in an incredible study, my very, very good friend Mike Sullivan and I have been involved in a study of the Song of Moses as the source of all biblical eschatology. You can find that on Preterist Apologetics on YouTube. Just look it up. Preterist Apologetics, Mike Sullivan, Don Preston. You're going to be amazed at how Deuteronomy 32 permeates, saturates the Old Testament prophecies. So my point is, here is Deuteronomy 31, 29 to 31, which is the lead-in, the preface, the introduction to the Song of Moses, Deuteronomy chapter 32, and it puts it in the context of the last days. So we're in Isaiah chapter 2. I've shared with you, and what I want to share with you right now, what I shared with you the last couple of weeks, ladies and gentlemen, listen to me very carefully. It strips the atheist, it strips the skeptics, it strips the Muslims and the Jews from their objection against Christianity. How so? Because it defines the last days, not as the last days of Christianity, not as the last days of time, but as the last days of Old Covenant Israel's theocratic existence. So in other words, if when an atheist says, look, your Jesus said he was going to come back in the last days. He hadn't come back. You say we're in the last days, but he hadn't come back. And we go, whoop, time out. And they're going, what? And we're able to say, no. We are not in the last days. The last days were the last days of Old Covenant Israel's covenant existence. That came to an end in AD 70. And listen, if you know anything whatsoever about history, then you know that Israel's covenant history came to an end in AD 70. The priesthood was abolished. The temple was abolished. The sacrifices were abolished. The atonement was abolished. Israel has no covenant existence today. We have thereby stripped the skeptics of their underlying fundamental argument. Do you see how powerfully and effectively we can answer the challenge of Christ by properly understanding biblical eschatology as covenant eschatology, i.e., the end of the Old Covenant age, versus historical eschatology, i.e., the end of human history, as all futurists claim? Folks, this is the answer to the challenge of Christ. Now then, let's look closer. We've examined several things from Isaiah chapter 2 and verse 2. Let's look now at Isaiah chapter 2, verse 3 and 4. Many people will come and say, now they're going to come where? To the mountain of the Lord's house in Israel or in Jerusalem, in Zion. But as we have seen, this Zion is heavenly Zion. It's not physical Zion. This means that all of the arguments about a restoration of literal physical Jerusalem, literal physical Zion, at some point in our future are false. That's not what Isaiah was predicting, ladies and gentlemen. And that refutes the skeptics. When we're able to show that the promise of the restoration of Israel was not supposed to be some event in 1948, was not supposed to be a literal physical gathering of Jews from every nation under heaven into the kingdom of God, we have stripped the atheist, we have stripped the skeptics of his complaint against Christianity. Okay. Many people will come and say, let us go up to the mountain of the Lord, to the house of the God of Jacob, that he may teach us concerning his ways, that we may walk in his paths. For the law will go forth from Zion, and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. Okay. Now, unfortunately, this is tragic. Dispensationalists tell us this prophecy has not been fulfilled because they, exactly like the atheists. Now, please understand, I'm not trying to offend anybody. I'm not trying to be overly harsh or critical, but I'm simply pointing out some similarities here. The atheist will read this passage and say, see, this is talking about the kingdom being established in literal physical Jerusalem. And the dispensationalist says, well, that's exactly right. The atheist says, well, that was never done, but Jesus said it was going to happen in the first century. The dispensationalist says, well, it is literal, it is physical, but no, it didn't happen in the first century. What happened was the Jewish unbelief made it, quote, impossible, unquote, that's Thomas Ice's word for why the kingdom was not established in the first century. Jewish unbelief made it impossible for God to keep his promises. And thus dispensationalism, and again, please understand, I'm not trying to be overly harsh or critical. I'm trying to be practical. I'm trying to be realistic. So if you're a dispensationalist watching this, please don't take offense. But I hope that you'll catch the power of what I'm about to say. God sent his son into this world to establish the kingdom. Every dispensationalist that I know of agrees with that. So he came to do a given thing. But the Jews rejected the offer, therefore God could not. The Jewish unbelief made it impossible for God to keep his promise. Therefore God postponed the kingdom. And the atheist is sitting back going, well, that's the silliest thing I've ever heard in my life. Because if God is an all-powerful God, how could the Jews keep him from keeping his promise? Some years ago, one of the leading dispensationalists of the day said, one of the reasons I love to teach Bible prophecy is because Bible prophecy is history written before it came to pass. When I read that, I was stunned. Let me say what he said again. He said, I love to study and teach prophecy because prophecy is history written before it comes to pass. Well, then Isaiah chapter 2, in predicting the establishment of the kingdom of God, in predicting the establishment of the house of God, i.e. the Messianic temple, in the last days, and Jesus came in the last days, Hebrews chapter 1, verse 1 and 2, it wasn't really writing about and talking about history written before the fact, because it was making a prediction that did not come true. The kingdom was not established in the last days. It was not established in the time period, in other words, Jesus' ministry, that the Bible set for the establishment of the kingdom. And that's exactly what the atheist says. Folks, what's the challenge of Christ? If I do not do the works that the Father has given me, do not believe me. Do not believe me for my word's sake. Believe me for my works. What was the work that the Father gave him to do? To establish the kingdom. Oh, and by the way, the Bible is very clear. The one who sits in the heavens, or excuse me, let me back up a little bit. Psalms chapter 2. Why did the heathen rage? Why did the pagans imagine a vain thing, saying, let us break his bonds, let us cast his bonds away from us? The one who sits in the heavens shall laugh. He shall hold them in derision, and he shall say, yet. One of the most powerful three-letter words in all the Bible. Yet have I set my king on my holy hill Zion. In other words, God in Psalms chapter 2 knew that Israel was going to reject the kingdom offer. He predicted it. He said they're going to say, no, we don't have this man. We won't have this man to rule over us. Luke chapter 19, 11 and following. But God said, in spite of their rejection of my son, which I'm predicting, by the way, in spite of it, yet, in spite of that, I have set my king on my holy hill Zion. Now there's prophecy, and that is history, written before it came to be. There was no failure, and the psalmist wrote it. And in Isaiah 42, 4 through 7, the Lord speaking of the sending of his Son to accomplish judgment and the kingdom, the Lord of heaven said, he will not fail. Well, you know, ladies and gentlemen, if my wife sends me to the store and says, I want you to get some butter and some eggs and some milk, oh, and by the way, get me some chocolate. And I come back and I don't have a single one of the things that she sent me to get: eggs, bread, butter, chocolate. She's going, where's my stuff? And I go, well, I bought you a Coke. I didn't send you after a Coke. You failed. No, babe, I didn't fail. I just didn't do what you gave me the task to do. Then you failed. But the Lord said of his Messiah and his mission to establish the kingdom, he will not fail. And he came to establish the kingdom. So what I'm sharing with you here, Isaiah said, many people will say, let's go up to Zion. It's not literal Zion. Hebrews chapter 12 said, you have come to Mount Zion. Isn't it obvious that when Hebrews was written, he wasn't writing to people from all over the world who had come from all over the world and gathered at the foot of literal physical Zion? No, they had come to heavenly Jerusalem. Again, Hebrews chapter 12, 21 and following. Now, since this is talking about what Isaiah predicted, it means Isaiah was being fulfilled, and that runs us out of time. So I'll see you next week.